The transcript of the phone call between President Trump and the president of Ukraine that is not verbatim has been released, but is it enough to impeach the president? Joining us now to talk about the new revelation is Professor Bill Hing from the University of San Francisco. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.
Professor Hing, last time that we spoke, we were discussing whether President Trump would act on his promise to release an unredacted, transcribed document of that call in question. And today, we received this. Take a look. A declassified document that, when you scroll through, clearly states that it is not verbatim. Professor, does this mean that there were portions of the call missing here, or that it's possibly loosely transcribed?
Yeah, I think that it's clearly not the entire transcript. And so that's still problematic. And I think that the Democrats want to see the whole thing for purposes of context, because obviously, when you see a document that's been redacted, you can't say for sure what the meaning is of every sentence because you don't know the exact context. So I think it's fair that the Democrats want to see the whole thing.
Does that mean that President Trump fell short of his promise here?
I think he did. He promised to give the whole thing, and he didn't. The Democrats have been in conversation with the whistleblower, and President Trump is trying to throw a roadblock to that conversation, and so it does appear that he's still either trying to hide something or he's trying to negotiate over whether or not the entire thing should be released, and I'm not sure what he wants in exchange for that.
In the transcript, President Trump asks President Zelenskyy to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son and to work with his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer pointed out that if this was truly a national matter, then why involve his own attorney here? Do you believe that to be a reason to suspect some wrongdoing in this case?
Honestly, I don't think that alone is a problem. There have been other times when presidents rely on acquaintances, including even business people who do business in other countries, to make overtures on behalf of the administration. So that in and of itself, I don't think is a problem. I actually think it's more problematic that even in this declassified version of the transcript, I actually think it's more problematic that the president invokes Attorney General Barr in it, that he says in a couple of places, I'm going to have the Attorney General follow up on some of these things as well, and you should also talk with him. Because the reason I think that's more problematic is that it shows that the president is involving the government in this attempt to get political information on a political opponent.
And in looking at this version of what was transcribed here, I don't see a mention of the military funding that the president was kind of holding over the head of the Ukrainian president, as was described by the whistleblower. Does that mean that that was also not included, and possibly that's still in question, whether it was actually part of that conversation? But I believe that the president did admit to talking about that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what is kind of a puzzle. It's pretty clear that he either talked about it or it was implicit in the conversation, because both of the people in this conversation, both presidents, knew that within a few days there was supposed to be this huge release of funds to Ukraine from the United States, and that in fact, a couple weeks later, the president decided to delay the distribution of those funds. In fact, they were delayed about 10 weeks. And so it's not that hard to put two and two together that there was implicitly on the minds of these two gentlemen the fact that the president wanted something, namely further investigation, and that if something didn't happen, if the president of Ukraine didn't follow through, that the generosity of the United States might not be so great.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy assured that President Trump didn't push him to do anything, saying, "Nobody can put pressure on me because I'm the president of an independent Ukraine. There's only one person that can pressure me, and it's my 6-year-old son." Both went on to say that Zelenskyy is himself working to remove corruption from his own country. So why would he get involved with anything questionable with the U.S.? What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think that Congressman Adam Schiff kind of said it best, and he's a career prosecutor. That this is very reminiscent of a mob-like figure saying to someone that he can put pressure on, "Hey, you got a nice thing going on over there. You got a nice country. Wouldn't it be terrible if something happened? We've always been I've always been helpful to you, and never gotten anything in return. And so we really ought to, you really ought to think about this. And here's something that you could do for me." And uh, so there's a lot in that kind of pressure that's put on someone, and the subject of that pressure is not going to readily admit that he or she's being pressured. And so it's not surprising that the president of Ukraine also denied anything, because he doesn't want to be viewed as a puppet of the United States. And so I don't think that any of that is inconsistent with the theory that there was a quid pro quo that was in the mind of both men here.
And after reading this release document, do you see anything in there that would add further grounds for impeachment?
Yeah, I'll tell you. There was what's interesting is that there's this reference to the removal of a prosecutor that was looking into something in Ukraine, and that Vice President Biden and his son kind of bragged about helping to get rid of that prosecutor. If you are aware of the facts, that's actually a problem for President Trump, because it turns out that that prosecutor that was removed was corrupt. That's very well known, and that the president of Ukraine actually agreed that that person was corrupt, and so it actually was helpful to get rid of that prosecutor. And Trump is depicting that as manipulative by the Bidens, when in fact, even the current president of Ukraine wanted that prosecutor out of the way. And in this memo that was released today, the president of Ukraine says, "Yeah, and I've replaced that person with somebody that I have 100% confidence in." And so what the president of Ukraine is saying is consistent with what is well known, that the prosecutor that was removed, that Joe Biden was happy was removed, deserved to be removed. That he was himself, that prosecutor was unscrupulous.
And later on in that meeting that we're seeing video of between the two presidents out of New York today, the president tried to flip the script and instead said it's the Democrats that were behaving corruptly. It is Joe Biden and his son, claiming that his son had gone to Ukraine and come back with $50,000 each time because he's doing some sort of business there. He didn't provide much more context than that. But well, what do you think about him trying to instead point the finger and the blame on Democrats?
Well, I think that it's part of President Trump's playbook to always distract and point the fingers elsewhere, just to get people off of the focus on him. I do want to say this, that Hunter Biden was appointed to be on the board of directors of this international company, and by all accounts, Hunter Biden actually didn't have the background, the qualifications to be on the board of directors of this particular corporation. But from my perspective, that's just kind of indication that he came from a privileged family, which happens every day in the world, every day in the United States. And so that's why Joe Biden doesn't mind that information is known. But there definitely is nothing criminal about that, and nothing criminal has ever surfaced with respect to what Hunter Biden did.
What do you say to President Zelenskyy commenting today that he will not say anything further regarding open elections here in the United States?
Well, I think it's smart for him to do that because he doesn't want to be classified as a Vladimir Putin, uh, because after all, they're going to be in that same category of somebody who's willing to interfere with an election. So that's why he said that. He doesn't want to be in the same category as Vladimir Putin.
And given this aggression between Ukraine and Russia, and yet we're seeing President Trump get slowly closer to President Vladimir Putin, and now with Zelenskyy here, what's going on? Can he actually make that happen and bridge the gap between these two nations that are feuding over Crimea?
I very seriously doubt it. There's no way that he has that kind of influence over Mr. Putin. Uh, Trump seems to think he does, but there's nothing in the last 2 years has indicated, last 2.5 years has indicated that Putin does anything that President Trump wants. And I very seriously doubt if the president of Crimea is going to be manipulated in a way because there's just so much animosity between those two countries.
Could this begin to look unfavorable in the eyes of Vladimir Putin now that we are talking more and more with Ukraine?
I don't think that Putin is at all afraid of President Trump and President Trump's reaching out to various uh, parties that may not be in political alignment with him. For example, even Trump's alignment with Israel, with the Israeli state, President alignment with Boris Johnson in the UK. Those are all people that are very anti-Russian, and none of that bothers Putin. And I just don't think that Putin thinks that President Trump has the clout or influence that Trump thinks he has.
And another portion of this conversation is, of course, a resolution that was passed today trying to protect the whistleblower and future sources that would come forward and remain anonymous to be able to reveal maybe some wrongdoing by our lawmakers. What do you say to that move today?
Yeah, I think that's a good move. And Mitch McConnell in the Senate, I'm waiting for him to step up and do something consistent with what he did yesterday, which was call for the release of the whistleblower complaint as well in a bipartisan effort. I think that he might support this as well. And so um, it may be that the Republicans just don't think there's anything there, and that's why they're willing to appear to be bipartisan on this. But at least the call for protections is something that both Republicans and Democrats should be in favor of, because this is something that can help both parties in this incident and in future similar incidents.
And that's most likely why we saw that resolution passed today. Thank you so much, Professor Bill Hing from the University of San Francisco, for talking with us.
You're welcome.
You're watching Chron On, the Bay Area streaming news 24/7.